On this week's podcast, we're going to take a slightly different approach. Rather than deal with a business issue related to conscious capitalism, this week we're taking a more personal approach. Our guest this week is a living example of what it means to be a conscious leader, and he shares the personal journey he's on as he faces one of life's ultimate challenges. Hello, everyone, and welcome to episode number 28 of The Conscious Capitalists with your co-hosts, myself, Timothy Henry, and my partner in making the world a better place through business, Raj Sisodia. Hi, Raj.
Hi, Timothy. Great to be with you again.
Yeah, good to see you. Favorite time of the week when we have a chance to get together with our guests. And we have a very special guest today. And do you want to introduce him, Raj, or should I?
Well, Danny Friedland is a well-known physician who has pivoted away from traditional medicine and has really become a world-leading authority on leadership, on conscious leadership, on holistic well-being, and has written a very influential book on that and has, I think, made thousands of presentations and given talks and has been a regular at our Conscious Capitalism CEO Summits for a number of years now, where he has given keynotes as well as workshops. So he is really a person who has influenced a lot of leaders as a high-level coach, as well as somebody who's helped them develop into more conscious leaders. And he's going through a very interesting phase of his life that he's going to share with us today.
Hello, Danny. Welcome to our show.
It is just the joy of joys to be with you. It's such a joy. And the impact that you've had on my life cannot be overstated. And I, for my community, that I would love to introduce you to Raj and Timothy. And this is the seminal book on conscious capitalism, written by John Mackey and Raj Sisodia. And this book was followed by that book, which is the Conscious Capitalism Field Guide, authored by Raj, Timothy, and Thomas Eckschmidt. And these have been life-changing books for me. They've opened my world to the possibility of what conscious capitalism can realize in the world. And Raj, you had written a book before that, Firms of Endearment. And it was that was a pre-seminal book, if there's a way of, and the data was fascinating because what you shared in that, I believe you followed 28 companies over a 15-year period, and the current data shows that these companies outperform, the market by a factor of about 10 to 1. Is that fair to say?
Yeah, it was 9 to 1 over 10 years in the original set of companies.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah.
So I became fascinated by that. And the neuroscience, what underpins that. And so that led me to write this book, Leading Well from Within, which is a neuroscience and mindfulness-based framework for conscious leadership. And so this work I fed into your stream to unpack the operating system around it. And it's been just I am so appreciative for your leadership, for your conscious leadership. You, beyond that, I believe we were in the Conscious Leaders Learning Lab together. We had a very intimate experience in Austin together. Mm-hmm. And I am just most deeply touched by your humanity, how you truly embody conscious leadership. There's an intangible There are practices with this, but there is an embodiment of it too. So I am so in awe of both of you.
You know, a few months ago, you received a diagnosis, and now you're in a different phase of your life, and you're charting a course that I think very few people have done before in terms of how you are dealing with that and how you are using your own experience to teach and to extract wisdom, loving wisdom from, and really to document that at every stage. To leave a legacy, and we're all, of course, hoping and expecting and praying that you will get through this and recover fully. Yeah. But I'd like you to share what how you have dealt with this initially, what caused you to frame it in the way that you have, and how that experience has been for you, and the reaction. There's some of the reactions that you're getting.
Well, my life transformed dramatically on November 12th. I was actually on a coaching call, and for the first time, I couldn't finish my coaching call. I had word block, and my client said, "Do you think you need to be seen?" And I said, "I think I do." And I went into the emergency room. And this was November 12th, 2020.
So not being able to find a word, that was enough to get you to an emergency room?
Yeah, well, I was embarrassed. It was that incapacitating that I couldn't get my words out. And so, and I speak for a living and I serve with my words for a living. So all of a sudden, there was a jar. It wasn't like I couldn't find a word. I couldn't get any of the words out. So I needed to be seen. And long story short, I went into the ER and I got an MRI and got the diagnosis that I had grade 4 glioblastoma. So-called terminal brain cancer. And I am intent on not to be terminal. But at this point in diagnosis, theoretically, I should have 15 months to live. And when you walk through that doorway, your brain goes into survival mode. And you don't only walk through that doorway alone. When I told my family, you can imagine they were shocked. They were crushed. So that morning, I was on one side of a doorway with infinite possibility, infinite life. By that evening, I was now walked through the doorway of cancer, and I walked through the doorway with my family. But then we're in the time of COVID, so I was admitted to the wards alone, and I have a mindfulness practice, and I was noticing my thoughts, and many of my thoughts were, you can imagine, spikes of fear. Like, what's going to become? What now? What with my family? What you go into all of these kind of like what if and all the catastrophes that could happen. And then because I've got also this, the foundation of appreciative inquiry. I've learned this in the exchange community. I miraculously found a generative question. I met you and David Cooper Ryder, who I understand you're dear friends with, has this statement that questions create worlds. Questions create worlds. And it's the difference, the default questions that our brain goes into survival mode because it's designed to protect itself from harm, puts us into a world of suffering. The key is, can you find a generative question that can put you in a world of flourishing? And because I've been primed for that, I found a generative question that was sufficient enough altitude. Questions have altitude as well. That put me into a state of where I could ask, a generative question at altitude that led to answers, that led to more questions, that led to the touchdown with something pragmatic. And the question I asked, the generative question I found, is not what now, but what matters most now. What matters most now? It was the question. It's the question. The first tenet of conscious capitalism actually is purpose. It's a purpose question. What matters most now? And when time is running short, there's only one answer that tends to make sense. And it's the answer, make every moment count. Make every moment count. And then that put me into I asked the next simple question, which is how? How do I do this? And it led me into two streams of answers. The first was a stream of make every moment count in living into intensely loving relationships, into living those cycles of receiving and giving love. So I have, ever since I've lived the nourishment of making every moment. This is a moment that counts between us. We're in a cycle of receiving and giving love here with each other. I'm intent on making this moment count. In addition to you, with everybody listening, I hope you can feel my heart. And now I understood I'm going through a spiritual awakening. I mean, I'm going through an awakening. I used to think that conscious leadership was the awakening, and it's more of a mindfulness frame, and I'm aware. But now I understand that there's a second dimension to this awakening. There's actually 3 dimensions that I've experienced. But I understand now that the power of conscious leadership is when it's connected to an awakened heart. The power of conscious leadership is when it's connected to an awakened heart. That's a second dimension of this. And so, and then the second stream of answers that came was my strong desire to leave a legacy with my work. Mm-hmm. And that is where we have created this YouTube channel called Living Well From Within. And it is, so if you Google search, if you Google search Living Well From Within YouTube, we have created a playlist for this. And the playlist captures my journey from day one. We now have 162 videos in the playlist. It's designed to be watched binge watch it like a Netflix series. Mm-hmm. And the key over here is there are multiple arcs of the story. And the overarching arc is transforming challenge into healing, growth, and wellness. So it overlaps significantly with the work that you're doing with the healing organization, Raj. And there are so many plot lines that are weaving together here. The key over here is it's in our family's voice. I didn't want to actually kind of do this alone. I wanted to bring my family, they've walked through the doorway with me, to watch my wife and kids go through their transformation. I have never been this contented. I've never been this integrated. I am flourishing. I'm flourishing at this. I've got sunflowers behind me over here. And so what we want to do is we appreciate. So it begins with 2 videos for context. The start here video number 1 is our wish for you. Turn your greatest challenge into healing, growth, and flourishing wellness. So it is, our challenge is cancer, but we appreciate our challenge is no more important than the challenges everybody else is having right now. Everybody's got challenge. So we want to share the lessons that we're learning from our family to yours to facilitate transformation through engaging us all in a healing journey together. So that's what is most inspiring to me in this offering. And then there is another. There's the mechanism of how do you do that to facilitate transformation. So the second video over here speaks to the ongoing spiral of learning and growth. Yeah, speaks to this active learning cycle. There's a concept of an active learning cycle, and the active learning cycle has three components to it. The first component, and this is based on the work of Kolb on experiential learning. The first component of is content and experience. It's content and experience. Content or experience. But content or experience alone is not enough to create transformational change. And the evidence is that history repeats itself. So the next component is key, because this is the component of reflection. It's the metabolism of the experience or the content that creates transformational change. High quality reflection that leads to inspiring action that comes back to a new experience. And this is not a closed loop. On its side, the upward spiral of growth and learning is experience, reflection, action, experience, reflection, action. It's a spiral, which I am mindful is the spiral of the cover of Conscious Capitalism and the field guide. So what we've done is in each one of these videos, we have built in active learning cycles to facilitate transformational change. So on this first video, here, if you go to the video descriptions, here is where I go through the distilled experience in the video, and then I inspire reflection and action. So day one, November 13th, my journey begins here when I'm describing the content or experience in the video. I have just received the results of my MRI. My most likely diagnosis is a high-grade glioblastoma brain cancer. Just before my brain biopsy, to confirm, my wife Sue asked me to record a message for our boys just in case anything happened during the biopsy. And the message I recorded for them, I said, the greatest wish I have for them in their life is for them to live a loving life. And that unpacks so much. Live a loving life. So now I want to inspire reflection for you. And the reflection, I'm inviting. These aren't prescriptive. These are just, these are offerings. So the questions are, if you received a life-threatening diagnosis, who would you reach out to? What message would you share with them? And the big question, why wait? Why wait?
Why wait? I mean, why wait? What a beautiful way of putting it. Yeah.
And then the key of here, what action will you take right now to share what matters most with your loved ones? Wow. So that's every one of these videos is designed to spark that type of transformational change. And I encourage you to subscribe to the channel And if you feel inspired by what you're seeing, to share with others, with a call to action for them to subscribe to.
Yeah, it's been amazing watching this journey, because I've been watching, like you say, binge watching. Like every 2 weeks I'll sit there and I'll catch up on the last 4 or 5 or 6 that are there.
Yeah.
And it's been incredibly powerfully moving, to see your family's reaction. I remember when you got your hair shaved and your son came up and gave you a hug. And within that hug, there was so much pain on his part, there was so much sadness, and there was so much love, like all wrapped in together. And it was just amazing to be able to be honored to witness that.
Well, I want to share with you, I want to go back here and share with you some magic that's happened. This magic that's happening on day 14 was a magical day. Or it's day 13. And part of my legacy, it's our legacy, it's all of our legacy, is that during the time of COVID, we've had in Conscious Capitalism a senior leadership network that's been gathering and masterminding, and many of the discussions have been around kids that have been in COVID and having a difficult time with social isolation. So I had proposed to Alexander McCoben, who's the CEO of Conscious Capitalism, who I've been coaching, who have been blessed to be co-coaching with Heath Dickett for a number of years in his conscious leadership. Before my diagnosis, I was going to pitch that this is time for the founding of the teen chapter of Conscious Capitalism. And I had a sense, I'm imagining, but I had a sense that there's a lot going on, and Alexander may have said, perhaps this is not the time for it. Maybe he would have agreed. I don't. But he was in such a heart space. His heart was open when I shared, and the power of evoked compassion. When people learn that I have terminal brain cancer, there's a natural outpouring of compassion. But here's what I love about. So I will take 5% of that compassion, that evoked compassion, and I will drink that in as good medicine. But what I want to say to people is use the other 95% of your evoked compassion to soothe your own suffering, and then to bring that into your families and into your communities at large. And that was the stream, and that's what's catalyzing a lot of people coming into creating this healing coalition. People are activated and it's not because of me, it's because they're awakened in their heart space. So when I shared this in Alex, he felt it in a different place. And he agreed, and not only did he agree to actually found the teen chapter, he agreed to let my son, Dylan, be the founding chair of the chapter. And so here's the announcement on day 13. And then what happens, and this gets me into the third dimension of my spiritual awakening. Then what happens is I get the call. So I'm about to they've got the final path back. And I am terrified that it's a grade 4 glioblastoma. That's the worst case scenario. And then I go in, and indeed that's the diagnosis. So my worst case scenario is realized. And then I come back home, And my boys are waiting for me, Zach and Bill, and Zach has, in 2013, we wrote a book called The Big Decision, where we were on stage together at Conscious Capitalism. So he's been a part of this ecosystem as well. They were waiting for me, and they just took one look at our faces with our shell shock. And they were like, oh, we went into a family grief response. Now, what I understood is that we were running these active learning cycles, and I was looking for, what is it that would give me some soothing? So we were running these mini, kind of breathing with heart compassion. We tried those experiments. Somewhat what worked, it was saying it is what it is. So opening to a doorway. None of that worked for Dylan. He was pacing. He was in a very agitated state. And finally, he grabbed his phone. He said, I'm going to go up and shoot a video. And this was the video he shot. And it's a video he shot that evening on day 13, when your parent has terminal cancer, and there's a thumbnail over here that says, don't walk out on your movie. Because how he starts, he starts this sharing about thinking about committing suicide, that he was in deep pain. He was in deep pain. He says, I don't know if I can survive this. But then he miraculously finds a metaphor that just dropped in from another world. He said, like, he doesn't know where this metaphor dropped in. He says, maybe this is a movie. And then he points up, maybe this is a movie, and I'm in the worst place in the movie right now. And he says, I have no control over the movie. And he says the movie is being directed by essentially he's pointing to God in the sky. He's saying, I have no control over how this movie ends. But then he pivots and he says, but what if the movie gets better? What if the movie gets better and I wasn't here for that part? And then he pivots. He says, my dad, he uses the Rotten Tomatoes. He says, we're at 0% Rotten Tomatoes. Because my dad makes movies that are 100% Rotten Tomatoes. What if I get to a 60% Rotten Tomatoes and I check out too early? Now, here's what I understood is, first of all, in the morning, when Alexander agreed to let him serve as the founding chair of the teen chapter of Conscious Capitalism, that was in title only. But then through his grief response, by the end of the day, he was embodying conscious leadership as a team. He was the embodiment of conscious leadership, because I'm thinking, how many lives did he just save by other teenagers who are on the brink, by encouraging them not to step out of their movie?
Beautiful.
So then I understood that there's a third part of this, that there's a third part of my awakening. I understood then that if I had had a milder diagnosis, we would not have gone through that grief response. So I understood that I'm called to have the worst case diagnosis, to serve. So I am called to have this diagnosis, and I am full. My third dimension is not only a mindfulness dimension, it's not only a heart space, it's the full spiritual surrender of being in servant leadership. And I feel I give myself over to this process, and because of it, I'm experiencing the most extraordinary synchronicities in my life. I'm so blessed. When you open your space to the world of spiritual surrender, there is a kaleidoscope of synchronicities that tend to arrive. And what that leaves me with a deep, deep, deep experience is, Einstein says the biggest question we can ask ourselves is, do we fundamentally live in a friendly or hostile universe? Do we fundamentally live in a friendly or hostile universe? I know in my bones we live in a friendly universe now. We live in the field of compassionate, loving energy, compassionate, loving, conscious energy. And because of that experience, and when we get stressed out, there's a corruption of that energy. So I've answered that question. Do we fundamentally live? I know that in my bones. I know that in my bones. And here's what I get from knowing that in my bones. What's dying in me is the fear of death itself. So I'm being born into a full flourishing of life, and not only physical death, psychological death. The psychological death of not feeling good enough. The living invalidation of that, because some people actually find more terror in that, and they will escape the fear of living invalidation, of living death, to prioritize the comfort of physical death in suicide, sadly. But as you lose, so I am in an embrace. I am aware of my current embrace in this field of conscious loving energy. And whatever I am ready to let my flesh melt off my bones at any time and experience the wonder of what consciousness transformed could look like as I meld more fully into this field of conscious loving presence.
That's amazing, 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 Dan, to hear you describe it that way, and it reminds me of the many levels and depths that go with leadership and personal development. And, we started at the beginning of this as sort of talking about, what are some of those tools for managing reactivity? And, at some level, that's really important. It's really important that we become self-aware around how do I manage and be aware of reactivity and shift into creativity. Well, and then there's a whole other level, which is also going much deeper in this journey of self-discovery and connection to our hearts, and then ultimately in a connection to something bigger than ourselves. And I'm so sad and sorry that's what it took to get you to that place, but I'm so happy for you that you're in that place.
Well, Danny, thank you for that. I think what you're doing is helping us emerge from kind of this trance. I think people, we live our lives sort of asleep in many ways. And when I heard the news about your diagnosis, I think that night or maybe the next night, I had this really clear vision. And the vision was, the message was, you're dying, now live like it.
Yes.
Right? And if you really think about it, you said, when you stepped through that door that you had infinite time here and you had finite. But the fact is, the minute you're born, you're looking at about 26,000 days in a life, average human life. And if you look at where we are at our stage of life, I'm probably looking at another 7,000, if indeed it goes, to that degree. So it's always very finite. The amount of time is incredibly finite, but carries within it infinite potential.
Yes.
Right? It's incredible what you can do in a day. It's incredible what you can do in 90 minutes even. I find, Viktor Frankl wrote Man's Search for Meaning in 3 weeks, right?
Oh, wow.
Impacted tens of millions, over time. So I think this awakening, you're basically awakening people, pulling people out of their trance, and saying, recognize this precious gift of life, and it's only with you for a limited amount of time, within which you have incredible potential. And the trick is, it's one thing to awaken, it's another thing to stay awake. Right? And I think what you're saying is we need to just stay awake every moment. And then I love the way you phrase it, stay awake to what really matters, right? Yeah. It's that, as you said, the intense giving and receiving of love. And so I think it's just, you're channeling on behalf of all of us some incredible wisdom, loving wisdom. I've experienced you over the years. I've never experienced you more powerful than you are right this minute. It is incredible, and there's so much more to come out of that, and recognizing that which is scarce does become precious. And the fact is, none of us have infinite time. We have limited amount of time, and we have to recognize and treat it as precious, and utilize it to its potential, which is extraordinary. What human beings can create within even limited amounts of time, the amount of beauty and the amount of love and the amount of transformation and change that is possible is extraordinary. So I think you've really awakened, I know you've awakened us, but everybody I think that is in your orbit is being transformed by this. Well, that's the biggest gift that anybody, you talk about finding meaning in suffering, as Viktor Frankl talked about. The only way to make meaning out of that is to reduce suffering in others and bring more joy for others. Because of what you're going through, you're doing that in spades. So we're just incredibly grateful and kind of in awe right now, of you and your family. And that there's a nobility to what's happening here. That's such an object lesson, for all of us.
Well, Raj, can I pay you a tribute? Because I think for many people in this movement, you represent the heart of the movement, the heart and wisdom of the movement. And so when I met you, as awe-inspired as you're expressing yourself right now, I was, from the get-go, you were a leading light for me in the organization. You inspired me, and I wanted to emulate you. And so, where do you feel you draw your deepest wisdom? How did you come to be this way?
Well, that's a whole other conversation. If you look behind me, it says Awaken Inc., right? Awaken is the name of the book.
Yeah.
I'm working on my own life story and making sense of it. And I think the many factors that shape all of us, and I happen to come from a background which embodied the extremes of compassion and unconditional love and caring on the one hand, and the extremes of misogyny and abuse and all of that on the other side. Sort of the toxic, misogynistic, abusive, hyper-patriarchal masculine energy that was embodied in this feudal culture that I come from, and in my grandfather and father and so forth. And the pure and innocent and unconditional love and care that my mother embodied. And like many from my culture and many around the world, really, we end up spending most of our lives trying to impress our fathers, or trying to be worthy of our fathers, or trying to follow in those footsteps, because they're out in the world doing, conquering and winning and trying to do all of that. But at some point, I think it's actually while I was writing Forms of Endearment, a specific moment when I was moved to tears with some of those stories. And I felt that I had found my bliss in Joseph Campbell's language, and that was really what resonated, and that's really what lit me up as a human, that this was my journey now, the purpose kind of landed on me, it found me, like a butterfly lands on you if you're still. And then it was a couple of years ago when I turned 60 that a coach just looked at the whole picture, zoomed out from it, and said, "Do you realize that you have been honoring your mother with your work for the last 15 years, starting with Films of India in 2005, and that before that you spent 45 years trying to impress your father? That was a that was a losing cause. It would never work. That was ill-fated to begin with. But then you found your true path, which was to bring. So what's missing in the world is really, what you talk about loving, right? The mother energy, the life-giving, life-enhancing, unconditional, caring love. My father's love was entirely conditional. Do what I say, and then you're in my good books. If not, you're dead to me. And that's all too common, I think, out there in the world. So I think it's really bringing that energy, and once she gave me that realization, which is I believe in the coaching so strongly, because I think coaches can change your life, with simple insights. That allowed me then to not only recognize that, but to really lean into it and live into it, and not be hesitant to express that in various ways. And then, of course, as I go through this book and my reflections, it is not about a wholesale rejection of the masculine. It's about really, as you said, wholeness. It's about saying what is the beauty, and the love and all of that exists on that side and on the feminine side. And how do we integrate the best of those two things? That's what it means to be human, right? To be strong and loving, right? To be, firm and compassionate, to have justice and mercy, and all of those things together. So that's really, and I think that part of my journey is still unfolding.
Yeah.
I found the sort of the mother side of things, but now recognizing my father's gifts and what I have received from him, or I can receive, I think that's the next part of it, to get to real wholeness.
So it sounds like, you've transformed your adversity into glorious learning. It comes back to the active learning cycle. And what can happen is, and Timothy, it comes back to how do we make, I've got this 4-in-4 framework that's got 4 steps that elevate you, but I think we can even simplify it further from here. We've all had an experience of adversity. And the question is, does that experience of adversity pluck you out of your active learning cycle or lean you into your active learning cycle? And I think what I'm hearing, Raj, is that you've embraced through your own journey, and perhaps facilitated by coaching, a leaning into the reflection of that. And there is a deepening into each one of these areas. So what happens is the purpose frames the content or experiences we want to have, and then that deepens you into a curation of content or experience, and then there is reflection. There's an attitude of reflection, which is ownership, openness, kindness, curiosity, presence, and always coming back to purpose. And then there's a form of the generative question, and that leads to inspired action and puts you back into that cycle. So what it strikes me is that this journey that we've all been on together, and Timothy, I'm sure you've had your own story as well when you look at your evolution. And so what I find powerful is that for us to know, are we on the right track in our learning? What's the signature of that? So essentially what we're running is micro experiments you're running micro experiments, and you're looking for the signature of energetic contraction or energetic expansion. So when you think about your dad, that puts you into a world of energetic contraction. When you think about your mom, that puts you into a world of energetic expansion. And now when you're thinking about the integration of both, I'm hearing also a more stable, you're actually integrating both to create a stability to understand that they both have a role to play. It's not an either or, it's a both and. Mm-hmm. So it's following those breadcrumbs in micro experiments for ongoing learning and development and transformation. And then what we get to do by putting it in this active learning cycle is we get to break it down into smaller parts. Because what happens is ultimately we want to go into big chunks of transformation. And I think that at times is overly limiting. So as we're doing our work in a stream of purpose and engaging in reflection, allowing yourself to take, what's the smallest step I can take right now? What is the smallest step I could take right now? Where I could get feedback from the field of compassionate, loving presence to give me a clue, am I in the field of energetic expansion or contraction? So you put yourself into a much more intimate relationship with the field of conscious, loving presence.
Wow. Wow, Dan, that is a beautiful way of expressing it in a practical terms, in terms of, we want our leaders, we want us all as human beings to be living from this place and learning to love well, to learning to live a life of love. Yeah. And opening that heart to this possibility that life can be so much more. And I love the way you framed it. I just love the way you framed it. And when you frame it the way you do, it seems almost, it's so compelling. It's almost like blindingly obvious. like what's the alternative? Like, once you've heard this or been exposed to it, like, what's the alternative? I want to be closed down. I want to be living at the surface of my life. So it's so beautiful for you to be such a living example of that experience and being able to share that there is this possibility of living from this space. Well, and this is deeply human.
Well, I also want to give credit to, this is channeling through me. This is coming from the field. And the reason we're all resonating with this, the reason why you're so inspired, in what you're expressing, is not because of my genius, but because we're expressing a universal genius that expands beyond all of us. We all have access. We all have access to this field of wisdom. This field of wisdom. It's not, and I think part of what the corruption is we all want to claim an ownership stake in the field. We want to claim that genius for ourselves without giving it over to the universal genius. So I am in full spiritual surrender. I don't want to claim any of this as my own. And I want to acknowledge that when you resonate with that, you're resonating with that, not because of my genius, but because you're resonating with the same field.
There's a quote I came across from Russell Brand. Do you know Russell Brand, the actor and comedian?
Yes, yes.
And that guy, he's really brilliant. I mean, and he channels this kind of wisdom frequently. So I just want to read this. Why are our systems not more representative of the divine, purer truth that we can access through spirituality? An infinite world made out of love and understanding. That level of consciousness exists. Our systems, athletic, entertainment, economic, political, and social, should be as close as possible to that feeling. Isn't it odd that we are able to experience this sense of oneness, this love that seems to transcend our personal form and everything we believe in? And yet, when it comes to our systems for organizing this plane that we live on, this material plane, the choices we make are not about that love and understanding. They're about resources and elitism and our monkey need for survival.
Yes, yes. Oh, that is glorious. And that's,
That's so well put, it's like
about staying awake. Stay awake to that, that higher level, right?
wow.
Don't fall back into the trance.
So that's when I unpack my live a loving life. There's a lot to unpack in that phrase, because it begins with a living reverence for life itself. Live a loving life begins with a reverence for this compassionate, loving presence. And whatever word you use for this, some people use the word God. Some people use the word Indira's net. We in our family, I actually call it the field. My wife calls it the force. So together we call it the force field. And because we said force field, well, it's the force field of miracles, and our children were born into that force field of miracles. So whatever word you use for that, the more love you shower, the more love and reverence you shower into that, the more you get back. So that's living a loving life includes that dimension, massive dimension. And I think what we're doing over here is we're paying collective reverence that this is not ours. This is a credit to this field. And then from that place, we actually are more liberated to engage in the free-flowing receiving and giving love with others, and loving life itself fully. And it's I'm just swimming in these waters is delicious. I've never been this contented and happy. I've never been this contented and happy. And it's not in spite of my cancer, it's because of my cancer.
Beautiful. Thank you, Danny, for our time together. And thank you for what you are sharing and giving to all of us through this journey. We feel like we're on the journey with you, and continuing to hope and pray for as much time as you will be granted, and we can all be granted for your presence here.
Yeah.
So thank you again for joining us, and I think this was a really special episode for us.
Yeah, well, I want to just close with just love and appreciation, with deep love and appreciation for both of you. You have been a major influence in my life, in the journey of my life. In many ways, I am primed for this moment because of what's preceded it. And you're a big part of the story of what's preceded this. You've given me the context to have this transformation. I want to thank you for that from the depth of my heart. And then I want to also just thank you all for listening, and I hope we've served you well in living a loving life.
Thank you, Danny. Thank you. Living a loving life in the face of death has been incredibly and truly inspiring. And thank you. And thank you to our listeners, for those of you that are listening on whatever channel you happen to be on, please feel free to hit the subscription button. And if you feel so moved, go to iTunes and give us a score and leave us a comment. Or you can leave us a comment at theconsciouscapitalists.com. And if you want to learn more about conscious capitalism, there's always our book, The Conscious Capitalism Field Guide. And Raj, where else can people learn more about conscious capitalism?
You can go to consciouscapitalism.org and learn about the movement, the principles, the chapters that we have all around the world, as well as the new teen chapter and all the other exciting things that are happening. So do join this movement and become part of impacting the world in a positive way through business.
And Danny, if people want to know more about the work you're doing, you've obviously given us the link to the video series that you're putting together. How else can they find out more about the wonderful and inspiring work you're doing?
Well, thank you for that. And so you can go to supersmarthealth.com. You can also go to do a Google search on Living Well From Within, the YouTube channel, and then look at the playlist and subscribe there as well.
Again, thank you, Danny. Been so inspiring. And we wish you all of the best. Love, peace, and healing to you and your family.
Thank you. Thank you. Thank you. Thank you.
Thank you.